And the topic today is native, hybrid, or progressive web app. And Kirilo Savin from EPAM, experienced designer, is going to share his experience and all the details, how to make a decision, how to develop the mobile application. Please, Kirilo.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming on our UX break. Today, I'm going to be talking about the types of mobile applications, which one you should consider for your specific project, what are the pitfalls you might face in the process, and in general, how to come up with the decision about which one to go for. And this is going to be me sharing what I learned in the process of investigating this topic when I was working, and not was working, but I'm still working on the project, which I'm going to to start off from the backstory of how I came up with this topic and why I felt that it was important to dive deeper into it. And so I'm for over the year I'm working on one startup project, which is which operates in Web3 domain, and I think that some of you might already heard about it, but if a few words about it. Web3 is all about blockchain and crypto, and the aim of the project which I'm working on is to reward holders of NFT tokens, and basically give them rewards like discounts or exclusive access to some products, just because they hold some NFT, and this way the NFT communities are showing their loyalty to the people, to the community. And as I just started working on it, the only thing I had is the logo written in this lobster font, and it was then it sparked an inspiration later for the whole UI of the application, and and this is just an example of a mood board I was looking for, and this neo-brutalism style was greatly it was the great for this specific project, I thought, because it really shows this retro vibe, I should say, and that's eventually what we decided to go with. And we had a release of our MVP version of the application for almost a year ago, which since then works great for us. And now we are continuing to build on top of that. We're getting feedback from our users and working on some new features. And why I'm telling you all of this, as you might see that this UI is pretty non-standard to what we're used to from the guidelines like material or human interface. It's completely out of the box, and so what I understood, that the mobile application would require a lot of efforts and time for us to implement, and on our project roadmap, we are planning to do a mobile application. And when I first heard it from my client, I that was like what I was feeling at that moment, and these GIFs, I think they are describing it pretty well. So what on the left we have work to be done, and the native application would really be tough for us to implement and to work with, as and although we had this web application ready, and we have a pretty well-established design system, that means that we would have to do everything from scratch, and to code everything like from the beginning. But what we're essentially getting is our existing web application with some new features which we were unable to implement on the web application. And what it can be is push notifications or access to some native features of mobile, and that's specifically what was the purpose of doing the mobile application at the first place. And that's when I asked myself a question of what if we can implement some of the missing features on top of the existing mobile version. And if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I would say that it was impossible. But since then, there were some other options for mobile applications other than native approach. And a little bit later, I'm going to tell more about it. But first, let's go to the options, like what we can possibly, how we can deliver mobile experience to our users. And generally, there are four types. The first one is mobile app, which is the most we have experience working with as a designers. It may be just a responsive version of your web application, or it may be a separate mobile version which opens on the same URL, but it may look completely different. Next up, we have native mobile app, which is developed for a specific platform. Would it be Android or iOS? Next, we have hybrid app, which allows you to support multiple platforms and to have and to write a single app once. And finally, we have progressive web app. Yeah, and about this, I will dive deep into it shortly. Okay, so let's start with the native app as the first type of a mobile app approach. So yeah, as I said, native app is built for a specific platform, and some great examples for this would be WhatsApp and Spotify, a quite popular apps. And why I like them is because they one if we take WhatsApp, it's completely native in terms of the platform and the UI. So here you can see it's just really almost it follows material guidelines completely. And it's also available for both iOS, and if you look on iOS app, it's also using all the native components from iOS. And Spotify, it's they have their own design system, but it's also a native app. So here we can understand that the UI can be done individually for every app, but obviously it's going to take longer to implement. Other than if we would go completely native instead. And what about the benefits of this type of applications is that it has a great performance because it's tailored to one specific platform. It has a programming language which was created specifically for it, and because of that, it gives it's quite secure, I would say. And it's very powerful in terms of access to native features, and they might be slightly different for Android and iOS, but with native app we can make sure that whenever we need some things like access to our gallery, or camera or microphone, etc. So this can be done in no problem with the native app. And overall, it gives you the best user experience because the guidelines have already defined best practices which users are familiar with, and they know how to work with the app, and how different patterns are working on that platform. And here I wanted to give a comparison of mobile app versus mobile apps. And as we know, there is an ongoing trend that users are accessing the most of the traffic is largely coming from mobile, and as of 2019, it was a research done that the global web traffic comes from mobile users, and in general, this number is slowly growing as with year after year, and it's really important that you make sure that your website or app is accessible from mobile. And out of this, we can see that almost 90% of the time the users are coming from the mobile app, and at the same time, from 10 to 20% are using the web for this. And here I have a question. And why people spend so much time in native apps? And there might be, not there might be, but there are quite an obvious reasons for that. But the four main ones that I think make sense to mention is this: that push notifications bring users back. You may have your phone in somewhere around of you, but you may do something else at the moment, and then you hear a notification, and that and look that someone liked your post or wants to add you in friends or etc. And this is something that just brings us back in on our mobile phone. And then when we unlock it, we have an icon, a home screen icon, which makes it easy to access. As we take, for example, a desktop, it's for mobile apps, it's doesn't get any easier than that. You may have your phone in your pocket. You unlock it. You open the app, and here you go. And you have obviously you have access to native features, which is not possible in web. And obviously, there is a possibility to work offline, but of course, it depends from the type of app. But partially, most of them offer at least some offline access possibilities. Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead. However, 80% of this time is spent on top 3 apps on device. This is what I found on the internet, and first time I was pretty skeptical about it. It's like a flashback to Pareto principle that 80% of time we use 20% of apps. And I can agree with that point that users may not use 100% of their apps. It can be half, it can be 40%. It can be different for every person. But as for me personally, I use like around half of my apps installed on my phone, and I installed most of them as only I get as I get a phone, and after that, like maybe in a month, I installed new app, but then I may not use it regularly, and yeah, you may share in comments if that's something that relates to you. I won't be able to see it, but it will be nice to check it out later. And yeah, with that said, there are other considerations that you need to have in mind. Is that you would have to develop independent program for each platform. So it's quite important that you decide from the start what you really need, and is there a possibility that you might need to scale to some other operating system in the future. So you may decide that you want to start with Android application, but then the project may require you to have it for the iOS as well. So yeah, you should really decide it right from the beginning, and like and for this yeah, this Elon Musk tweet, which is example of how I think the research shouldn't be done. But this is where I think you may use a survey for this. If you of course have the existing user base, which you may ask what uh, what yeah, what they're using, or is it Android, is it iOS? As for my example, as we started from a web application, and later on when we have users, we may ask them what they're using the most. And it also depends from the country, I should say. For example, in US, it's around 10% more common iOS than Android. And for India, I was looking that Android is pretty common, but again, it depends. And next up is that everything that needs to be customized and as out of the box will increase development time and cost tremendously. And what I mean what out of the box is everything which you won't find in guidelines. And as you know, there's a material theming which allows you to modify your UI, but not a lot. It's only colors, fonts, and you also may change the shape of your components, and that's basically it. And if your project really wants to stand out in terms of UI, then this development time, it can be largely different depending from the complexity of your application. And the key takeaways I made for myself on these native apps is that one, it's best suited for a single operating system. Secondly, it would be perfect if this app would be used constantly or at least regularly. And as it was written in one book, you need to have something which will have users on hook, and which allow them to come back to your app. Third thing is that it's better to start with MVP, and generally, I think it's a good approach, not only for applications, but for them especially, because you might have a lot of items on your backlog that you think you should do, but you have to understand that it would require time, and it's best when you go with some core functionality first, and then you try to release it your product as often as possible, and get feedback from your users, and later to build on top of that. And this way, also, your client may start getting revenue earlier, and won't have to put all money and create the application from start to finish with all the feature that he wants or that you found were great to add during your research. And fourth is it would be great if you let users to get started quickly, because when people download your app, they have to commit themselves to it. They may look for different apps and compare them, read reviews, and later then they install it. And when they run it, they may also face with some onboarding, or they may see a sign-in wall in front of them, and they couldn't use it unless they are registered. And also you might probably won't need to ask them any permissions until they should do. For example, when I use some applications for ordering food, maybe you don't need to ask my geolocation until I added the food in my cart and I'm ready to check out. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And next, let's go to hybrid apps. Hybrid apps, if we compare to native, they use a single app for all platforms. And some examples would be Gmail, Twitter, and Instagram. Let's talk about some pros and cons of hybrid apps. First, it's scalable. So yeah, as I said, you may want to start from one operating system, and then if you need with hybrid app, uh, you can make it work on another one, and you don't have to and you don't need to have a separate app for this. And it's not only about mobile apps, it also can be scalable in terms of apps for which can be installed on desktop like Windows or Mac. And second is overall lower development cost and time than native application. And it's especially true when you would have not one but two apps or even more. The prices will be different tremendously. And third thing is that it simplifies maintenance. Yeah, it's I would say it's more of the development standpoint, but also for you as a designer, the hybrid apps gives you a possibility to have a single version of design. Yeah, for whatever platform you decide to go with. And what about some cons is that it generally has a slower performance than native apps. There may be slightly slower transitions between pages. Secondly, it has a worse user experience because you may do your hybrid app for one platform and then scale it to all others, but users may be not familiar with the patterns that are used for that platform, and for some it can be additional learning time that they need to figure out how to work with it. And one last thing, and is that it's less secure. It has some vulnerabilities which can be exploited, uh, but it can be avoided for sure, because there are many popular apps which we know which are hybrid apps, and if they exist, it's totally not a problem to make it pretty secure. Oh, sorry. And here, so it's important to choose the right framework right from the start if you decide to go with the hybrid apps. And here we would need to make a transition from OS-specific frameworks to cross-platform. And that's also a great question to ask when you have a kickoff with your stakeholder, is to know which what are the platforms are we planning to support, or if you don't know, if your client doesn't know what he needs right now, what are the possibilities for the future, and where it may go. And it's also good for a designer, I think, to understand at least and to know the names of some of these frameworks, because later on you can find some existing libraries, for example, like React. It can there is MUI library, which is built based on Google's material design, but for React, and and with this you can just go on the website, look for a specific component, check all the requirements and how it works, what you can do with it, etc. And it helps you to speak with the developer on the same, to be on the same page, and to then know what is possible to do with this library or not. Yeah. And here I have a Gmail app, which you may see is the UI is from material, and the only thing that tells us that it's iOS is by this home indicator. But why I like this example is because it has some components which are specific to material. For example, we have this fab icon, and uh, to this hamburger menu, it opened this drawer, side drawer. And as we know, this is something which is not in which is not in the human interface guidelines. You won't find that. But here's you may see that it's completely possible, not problem at all for the hybrid apps. And for the final part of this talk, let's see what progressive web apps has to offer. If describing it in one sentence, basically Progressive Web App, or PWA, is a website that can be downloaded as an app straight from your browser. And some examples I have here is Pinterest, AliExpress, and OLX, which are all progressive web apps. And there are quite a lot of things which are great about progressive web apps, like no installation required, it's lightweight, it it enables offline mode and some other things which we will go into detail. First, let's see what are the comparison of capabilities and reach for native versus progressive web apps. So here on the left, we see that this is research which was done by Google. It's 5 years old, the most recent I was able to find, but we may see here that mobile web, if we compare top 1000 mobile apps versus top 1000 mobile web properties, we may see that monthly unique visitors is almost 3 times higher for mobile app for mobile web than the same app, but which is native. However, if we're talking about engagement, and engagement tells us how much time do users spend on apps, inside apps, that this number is significantly higher for apps than the mobile web. And what progressive web app gives us is that this connection, and like I should say, the best of the both worlds. It has the highest reach, because with progressive web app you can target the users of the desktop or of the mobile, because everywhere there is a default browser. And in terms of capabilities, it's also pretty good. It can be definitely compared with the native apps, and yeah, let's. I will mention this shortly. First, let's talk about mobile, like push notifications. When you visit some websites, you might see this notification pop out. And this tells you that this website is a progressive web app, and it allows you to enable or disable notifications for the website. And on the right, I have a screenshot from Pinterest's notifications, and Pinterest, they have everything. They have their mobile applications, which you install from Google Play or App Store. They have a web app which you can access directly from a browser, and also they have progressive web apps. So this first, it has in Pinterest, it says choose what notifications you will see in your app or on website. Next up, they have your email. You can choose if you want to get notifications on your email. And finally, this push notifications is telling us that it's that Pinterest can be used as a progressive web app, because you can choose which notifications you will receive on your phone. Even if you don't have native application installed. Next up, we have an ability to add your app to a home screen. For example, this is from a Starbucks app. You can go to menu, choose add home screen, and yeah, add it like an icon, which allows you then not to go to the website and to type in it in the search box. It's pretty similar to what you would do in browser when you add bookmarks, but here it's even simpler. You can add it to your home screen and yeah, access it even easier. Let's now talk about yeah, try to compare what are the native features that can be supported and are not possible with progressive web apps, because that's also something that you should yeah, keep in mind, and that's also pretty dependent from the browser. Yeah, so it's also will be different, but what we do have and what is possible. So you can have access to your camera and gallery, a geolocation access, access to a microphone, to push notifications, and you can even do some payments using NFC, for instance. But what can be done with progressive web apps? You can't have fingerprints in them. It's simply not possible. Other things would be a Face ID and voice control. So if you would need any of this, progressive web app won't be an option for you. Progressive web apps are pretty lightweight, and again, if we compare this on the example of the Pinterest, we may see that iOS app has 56 megabytes, whereas Android is around 10. And on the right, progressive web app, which is yeah, it's drastically less. It's like 150 kilobytes, and when we're talking about how powerful the phones are nowadays, and it's a real computer that we're having in our pockets, it's like nothing, and this progressive enhancement, this I would say is in the essence of the progressive web apps. And what it basically means is that you can add features on demand whenever you need them, and you can stop at any time. And with this, there may be three possible types for applications. First, you may have traditional web application. It can be pretty many. It's quite a common thing. I'm sorry, for many websites, would it be landing or some other website, you might not need any of these push notifications features, or a native yeah, or access to some native features like gallery or camera. And you might stop there. You won't need the progressive web app at all. Next, you may want to have a vision to do a progressive web apps right from the beginning. And a third case, which is um, which I would say is the same as I have at the moment, is that I had a web app which I would want to upgrade to a progressive web app. And when you do so, you might want to add only what you need. So the progressive web app is like a bridge between mobile apps and web. And it can be anywhere in the middle, at the start, or you might have every feature that is supported by progressive web app, and it yeah. And you can add and only focus on that feature that you think are important for your specific project. Yeah, next I want to mention the offline access part, and how that works is also it's quite similar to how the browsers cache data, and how it works is that when you load the page for the first time, it saves some of the data externally, and it allows you to then, when you access the same page the second time, it gets downloaded much faster. Yeah, and that's basically how caching works. And with progressive web apps, you can cache and not can, but only, as well should such things as icons, CSS style sheets, web fonts, images, and it can go like up to the some pages or templates. For example, you may have your profile page on or settings, which you know will get updated quite rarely, and you can cache it completely. And this way, users are going to have an access to it no matter they have internet connection or no. And progressive web apps are working well with the integrations from the other apps which have open API. And here are some examples of integrations which we are currently using or planning to use on our project. For example, we decided that we wanted to use some existing solution for payments, and we can go Stripe with this. We wanted to collect analytics gather analytics from our users, and we can integrate Google Analytics, for example. If we wanted to automate some actions, some user actions, and then have information sent to some elsewhere, we can use Zapier and Google Maps, obviously, for some I would say in my case it would be the discounts which you can search based on the region you live in or country, and yeah. so you can see it on map and go from there. And that's all sounds great, but there are still some challenges that you need to consider when you decide to go with progressive web app. And first, it's browser support. It's pretty good for Chrome, as it was initially quietly it was developed by the first web application which was developed in 2016. It was supported on Chrome, and since then most of the features are covered specifically for Chrome, which is the most common browser nowadays, and it has if I'm not mistaken, a year or two ago, it passed 1 billion users. And this is, again, to my point that with progressive web apps, we can target much more people. Unlike for mobile app users, this number would be at least twice as less. And what we have about Safari, which is the default browser for iOS, it's what's supported. It's quite partial. You would need to look for a specific feature on your phone to see if it's possible even to do or not. And yeah, on the right here, I have the screenshot from the website which developers usually use to see information about CSS properties and if they work for and to see how they work across different browsers, to see if they need to write something down initially. And like we can see from here that for Firefox and Safari and Opera as well, it's too many red and even some old versions and new ones, they don't support progressive web app at all. But yeah, for Chrome we have like it's quite good. Yes, and then let's go to the next one. Is that this one I would say it's quite subjective, but generally progressive web apps are not as trusted as the native apps. Especially when it comes to providing some doing some payment in web, and entering your card details. Users may hesitant to do that on web, as they think that it's not secure, but it's a misconception, I would say, and that progressive web apps can still be secure if done correctly. And now let's quickly go through the tools which might help you to look to investigate progressive web apps even more if you ever would need or want to. And first we have Lighthouse. It's a Chrome extension, and generally it allows you to get a report on quite a lot of different categories like performance, accessibility, some best practices, but also it can give you a progressive web app score. And this is just, I don't remember which website it was. I tried to launch it, and I found, and I can get to this short report that's going to tell me how much it's a progressive web app, if it's even that. And from this I can see that okay, we have service worker meet the instability requirements. So yeah, we can install this app, add it to our home screen. So this one is supported, yeah. But here we have another one which looks like error, but it just tells me that for this specific application we don't have a custom splash screen, which is also possible to do with progressive web apps. And second one is another one I really like, is that it named what PWA can do today, and it allows you to do exactly what is written here. It gives you an information for every type of feature, which which can be supported by progressive web app, and it allows you to see if that's supported on on your specific device. And I was just looking at it on my phone a little, and I would say that 90% were working. And for example, this I have here, augmented reality, and it said that this feature is not yet supported on your device. And then I also sent it to my client, which who has iOS. Yeah, he owns iPhone, and he looked to notifications, and unfortunately they were also not supported on iPhone. So that's again to the point that it's it's quite dependent from the device you have, and from what browser the user will be accessing your application. And let's sum it up, and to conclude, I have this table where I wanted to compare these three types of applications in different categories. So for operating system, native app, we have, it's specific to one operating system. Hybrid apps are cross-platform, and progressive web apps, they are browser-based. In terms of development cost and time, the most expensive solution would be a native app, and hybrid app will be slightly less, especially if you wanted to scale it to another platform in the future. And progressive web apps are generally about 3 or 4 times less expensive than native apps. Again, there are quite a lot of things that might be accounted in. For example, it may depend from the complexity of your application. So from even where your developers are located, and the rates are also different. So it's quite individually. but in general, that's how gradation will look like. When you're talking about native feature support, both native apps and hybrid apps show pretty good results, and for progressive web app, it can be limited and is based on the browser, its version, and yeah, and that's it. In terms of performance, native apps are the best, and hybrid apps and progressive web apps as is somewhere in the middle. But again, I think that it can be optimized, and it's not that big of a problem, but it can be a slightly different and worse. Security, I put hybrid apps and progressive web apps as 2 out of 3. Reach for native apps, it's the lowest because with this we're targeting one specific platform. With hybrid apps, it can be more if we wanted to, and will ever need. And for progressive web apps, it's the best out of all, because with this we can aim for the users who are both using desktop, or they might only have their mobile phone, and they may not need to have native application installed. And maintenance, the last one, it's pretty easy to sorry, I think it should be opposite. Yeah, here it would be the hardest to maintain a native app, and especially when we would have 2 different apps, for example, that and then the developer would have exactly 2 different versions of the same app, and when we implement some features, we need to make sure that it's added on both, and then it gets published on the Google Store or App Store, and yeah, and this is the hardest for the native apps in that sense. For hybrid apps, it's slightly less because you're working basically with a single code base, and you can publish these changes in one go. And for progressive web apps, it's yeah, the best and the easiest in terms of maintenance, because it works pretty much as you would do some changes, you deploy them to your to production, and then the users would see the updates as soon as they update, not update, but as they are opening your web application, and when they have internet connection, at least at the first time they're doing so. And finally, I wanted to go through some questions which you might want to ask yourself when you're deciding which type of application is best exactly for your case. And there are many of those, but some of the most important ones which I see is that first, what platforms are we planning to support? Um, do you want to have it for only one platform and then and scale it to another one, or you might not need it at all? What kind of user experience do we wish to offer? Is that something that can be done with just web application? If so, you don't need a mobile with a web. It can be done with a web application, and you simply don't need to put much more money and time into creating a native app when most or all of your features can be done in yes, simply in a web version. What are our development resources? As it's also one thing that depends from the project, and it's for my case. I'm working on the startup. The budget is pretty limited, and we won't even have so much time and money to go with the native app, and that's really what you should look into to see if how strict is your budget or your client's budget, and how fast he wants to see the MVP version of this application. It also depends from that. But of course, if you're not limited at all, and you have no deadlines, you can of course go with a native app, but again, try to minimize the functionality to its minimum if you do so. And finally, do any of the existing design system works for you? And you might look into the existing frameworks for like we all know this material UI, or the iOS and native UI. You need to understand if that works for your project. If you see that you don't rely as much on the personal branding, because in my case, as I was telling, it was quite important for us to do it differently, and as personal identity, and heavily relying on branding is something which we wanted to make ourselves different from the competition. And as we already have an existing design system, we don't specifically want to use material UI, as we understand that we have users who expect our mobile application to look completely different, and when they install our app and see material UI, they might just don't like it and get back to the web application instead. Yeah, so that's also quite important for you to know. And lastly, I have a few links if you want to dive more into progressive web apps. And the first one I have is this video from Google, and it's a 1 hour long video, as I remember, and it's pretty well describes how the first progressive web apps were created, why there was such a problem to create it. It also includes some of the best practices for developing and implementation, both from the development part and design best practices to look for. Next, there is a 1 year progressive web app retrospective from Pinterest. And this is just a great success story of how Pinterest decided to look into this web progressive web app world, and it's just shows the numbers of how how much more users they were able to get out of it, and how much more visitors they had with their native application, and in comparison to progressive web app. So yeah, check it out if you want to. And another finally, and there is a documentation. If you would ever need to work on the progressive web app, you can check it out to have all the best practices in one place. And with that said, I think it's all. And thank you for listening. Yeah,
Thank
any
you
questions
for
you
the
have?
presentation.
Hopefully it was helpful, and you learned something new. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, please raise your hand if you have any questions. Meanwhile, I want to remind you to go back to the We Are Community platform to say thank you to our speaker. If you find this lecture useful, feel free to rate it and leave a feedback. And if you have questions, please unmute or raise your hands. I actually enjoyed it. I think I was thinking about, I wish someone told me all that a couple years ago, because I started working with progressive web app just I think a year ago, and I could really use a guide like this, which would be a great start to just decide where to begin. And if no one else have questions, I have. Just was curious, how do you, Kirilla, handle the accessibility issues, which could have happened in the progressive web app? For example, when the user is browsing the web application, the responsive mobile version of the web application, they have the navigation of the browser like something simple as back button or a swipe or something like that. And in progressive web app, sometimes it opens full screen and the user won't have any controls like back button or something like that. So how do you handle that? Do we need to add some additional navigation or some additional controls to avoid the situation when the user is browsing and gets somewhere with no possibility to go back, for example?
Yeah, so for this question, I would say that progressive web apps, they can look completely the same as the native apps, in that sense that you can have your bottom navigation, for example, and you may also have when you, for example, go inside one page on the lower level, you may have the back button with the title at the top. So yeah, that in that part, it's not a big problem with the navigation specifically. I think, yeah, that's
Thank
it.
you. That was actually the only one issue I faced working with the applications, and
Yeah, because yeah, as you
I found
open
out when I was testing it.
this Pinterest, which I was referring like a lot today, and open their web application, you can note that it also has their like bottom navigation, and it's what we think that is purely native. It's accessible there, no problem.
Cool. Thank you for the answer. And we don't have any more questions. I think the guide was really full and informative. So we could we will share the video of the lecture. I think you will all get an email, so you could rewatch it or rewatch just some parts that you were most interested in. And thank you all for attending. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.